Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Science Podcast by Science Society Club. I hope you're well. Today, as you can see, April's not with us today because she's off fighting some hordes of zombies somewhere. So we have Ice. So Ice, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about why we chose this specific topic for today's episode.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Ice and I am the other PR for our Science Society Club. And why we chose this topic was because, Atlantis. It's such a big topic, and since I've always been an avid reader, I've always been curious about the question of whether Atlantis was real or not. And the fact that, there have been so many depictions in terms of books, movies, stories. I mean, you can count on it. Like, there's so many things in depictions.
Too many, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And then, and if Atlantis was real, would we be able to, go and see the world under there and maybe even live alongside them? And the fact that the technology is so advanced, and if they did bring it on land, like, our life would be so much easier. Yeah. And the other question I want to know was, would they be able to live, alongside us? Like, be in peace? Or would we revert to the same old ways as our previous generations where they had, we have to conquer everything.
And everyone just fight, battle royale, and whoever's the biggest kingdom wins. Which one do you think is more possible? Do you think we're going to be friends with them, or do you think we're going to fight and get conquered or conquer them?
I would say for this question, we would be able to live with them because, with us just adapting to the different races that's all over the world, I would say that we would really be able to live with them. And they utilize our resources, we utilize their resources. It's like a win-win and like a friendship kind of band where give and take is there. And can you imagine living with them, we visiting them underwater, they coming up, even their food? Oh my god.
Oh god, seafood will get cheaper.
I know, right? That is such a
seafood will be so much cheaper if we actually have friends who live under the water. We don't have to have huge boats catching fish. They can just be like, hey, can you send me some fish? And they'll just show up with a lot of fish. That seems like a future I can get behind.
That's true. So now that I've answered the question as to why we have this topic, let's first go into the myth of it. So Atlantis was said to be allotted to Poseidon. And in the middle of Atlantis, there was said to be a mountain, and there lived a couple who was an offspring of the soil. Since we'll talk about Greek here, so yeah, the offspring of the soil, and their names were Evener and Leucippe, and they had a daughter called Cleito. And when the couple died, Poseidon married Cleito, and then they had 5 pair of twins. And can you imagine that 5 pair of twins? Okay, so
I can't even imagine just one.
Yeah. Okay. So when they had grown up, Poseidon allotted 10 provinces to each of these descendants of his. Therefore, later on, each of his sons and their descendants became the 10 royal houses of Atlantis. And so the people of Atlantis, as we know, their technology was really advanced. They had every kind of fruits, food products, even the metals, and everything you can ever imagine. Even the animals was so sophisticated.
Magical.
Yeah, magical.
Oh my god.
Even
sophisticated animal.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and the materials they had, you can imagine timber, metal, every type of metal, and they use it to advance their technology and even make waterways, and
Maybe they discovered vibranium.
Yeah, that would be so cool. Yeah, and so but then it was said that Atlantis degenerated. It was said that Zeus, the god of the sky, and the other gods found out that the Atlantean people were being too greedy, arrogant, and never enough for everything they have. And because of that, Zeus sent an earthquake, and Atlantis was swallowed up by the sea in one day and one night.
Speed.
It was, yeah. Can you imagine the size of the island, being swallowed?
Yeah. The only thing I can think about is Thanos, water, instead of just turning people into dust. It's no, sink. Okay, so now that we know the myth, I guess the next thing that we would have to talk about is it actually just a myth, or do you think it's real?
Well, for one, according to Plato, it was believed that it was a story made by him. It's like when a human gets a lot, they become arrogant when
Right.
they don't know how to utilize it properly, you know.
Mhm.
I feel like it's his connection to say that, you know, you shouldn't get too arrogant and like with the advancement in technology, you shouldn't be too much ahead. Pretty much
I
that.
feel like it can apply to how we are right now, but yeah.
While the second one that we found was about Graham Hancock. He was a writer and he talks about a structure called Gobekli Tepe, and this structure was found half underground, half on above ground. It was such a sophisticated and organized structure that they did not believe that people back then was able to create such a thing that was such organized and sophisticated, and you know, everything you could think of. And we also found about how Plato talks about the time when Atlantis was sunken, and Graham also he thinks that it was a connection, and this event, it was called the Meltwater 1B. Yes. And this was also caused by ice sheet melting, and because of that, the seawater rose. So Graham thinks that it is connected to the catastrophe that Plato talks about.
Do you think it's a coincidence?
Maybe, who knows? Like anything can be possible.
I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, anything and everything is.
Okay.
And also the fact that how this building could be created by a race that was even older than a hunter and gatherers. Because we all learn about hunter and gatherers. They were just starting, but this shows that this race was hidden even from them, and they were so advanced to the point that they were able to create something that was like mind-blowing. And even for us who discovered it later on things, it was such a mind-blowing thing that happened. Yeah.
So do you think this Gobekli Tepe thing is built by quote-unquote survivors of Atlantis, or?
That is a very hard question to answer. I mean, I believe it could be, but from the evidence that is found by the present us humans, it could be no.
Some people may not be convinced yet, so I'm going to hit you with another dab of evidence. So let's talk about the location that Plato says that Atlantis is. So Atlantis is believed to be in the middle of the mid-Atlantic, so between North America and Europe of the modern day. So back then, as you've mentioned before about Meltwater Pulse 1B, it happened around 9600 BC. And people, or I guess scientists, think that it was caused by a comet, fell down in North America and melted a lot of water, and it just went down into the sea. Now, if we remember anything, which I don't, from geology class, we know that the Earth is kind of made up of these multiple plates. And so when there's a lot of things going into the water, so the water can also push down on the plates that is at the bottom of the water, and they can kind of clash and kind of cause something to rise up from the sea. So let's say we have two things, they crash, they kind of push on each other, and then eventually they're gonna kind of push the both of them to emerge from the water.
Yep.
And around the area that Plato says that Atlantis is located, there's this thing called the Atlantic Ocean Ridge, which is basically a point where three plates meet in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It is very weak there because it's kind of like, three plates clashing, and there's I guess there's like a space in between them. And some scientists has kind of gone down there and took up some of the rocks to do tests on them, and they found that these rocks are very similar to continental rock, which can only be formed if it has some kind of contact with air, which means that it would have to be not submerged at some point. And so it basically says that there could have been a chunk of land that existed in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and that kind of chunk of land kind of may have bounced in different periods of time, And they also found some other materials that can only be created or kind of exist if that area is not underwater. So now I want to say that even with all of these quote unquote evidence, we still can't really say that Atlantis is real or not, but at least we can kind of make a educated guess that it's at least plausible that there was an island there. It might not be Atlantis, but could be something. And also another thing is that this area would have been habitable, the temperature wouldn't be too high, and it would have been quite pleasant to live there back then. Now, the thing is, the probability that Plato just randomized a location and a time period that could coincide with this natural events that happened in the past is very slim. So we can kind of take it that maybe Plato was actually referring to something that actually happened. Anyway, if you're interested... Why are you biking outside? If you're interested in this topic, you can kind of look up Randall Carlson. He's an architect with background in geology and astronomy. And now that I've stated all of that, I want to say that I feel like a conspiracy theorist after all of these research for the evidence of Atlantis. Now, one of the things that Plato brings up, or I guess one of the things that we kind of associate Atlantis with, is their advanced technology. We kind of see it as very advanced, even more advanced than maybe today, or maybe because it was written like a very long time ago, so it seems very advanced. And also depending on the source of like where you kind of hear about Atlantis, it will have different levels of advancement of technology. So why don't we talk about some examples of those?
Okay, for one, Plato, he he for one said that everything was advanced for his time, because during his time it was just like they were just getting into like education and then army organization, everything. But for Atlantis, they had everything ready. They had seafaring. Their armies were so organized. They had like everything, and then they had they even had religion. And then okay, if religion comes, astronomy, art, architect, I mean, we can see it as an evidence from the Gobekli Tepe, which we think is from
Could have
Atlantis.
been, yeah.
Could have been from Atlantis. And for someone of that time, like Plato already thought that this was already so advanced, the technology. Another example that I could give you is from the movie Atlantis, The Lost Empire. And this movie was created by Walt Disney. And in this, they talk about the heart of Atlantis, which was actually a magical crystal, and it was the heart of Atlantis, which means it was the energy source that gave power to everything. Technology, their army enforcements, border.
They basically have like unlimited energy, so they can create whatever.
Yeah, and it was so, I mean, even for us, it's too advanced. I mean, come on. Yeah.
I still wish we have some kind of, I don't know, unlimited energy source. Well, anyways, those movies seem fun, but I've actually never watched them before. So I'm going to talk about a movie that I've actually watched for once, because apparently I don't watch any movies that I talk about in this podcast. So let's talk about Aquaman. So in the movie, there's this technology. One of the weapons that was used by the Atlanteans is the plasma gun. So this plasma gun, the explanation for it is that it converts water to plasma. Now, to understand how it works, let's talk physics again. So what plasma is this really hot matter. It's very difficult to explain what it actually is without actually like going into like the physics rabbit hole. So I'm going to use a very simple explanation for it. So we've probably already know, or at least heard, that there are three kinds of matter. So we have solid, we have liquid, and we have gas. I'm just going to use a example.
Yeah.
Let's start with a block of ice. So if you have a block of ice, you put a lot of heat in it. You put a lot of heat in ice. Ice is going to melt into water. So a solid will become a liquid if you apply enough heat. And then if you apply a lot of heat in water, it's going to become gas. So solid liquid is going to become gas. Now, if you add even more heat, it's going to turn from gas to plasma, which is kind of like this superheated gas. Now, you may think that, oh, plasma, it sounds very fancy and it's probably not something that we would experience in the daily life. So I'm going to give you some examples of plasma. Number one, the sun is a huge ball of plasma. Lightning is also a very hot thing that just suddenly strike from the sky. And if you feel like that's still, a rare, quote unquote rarity, the sun is very far away and lightning doesn't really strike very often, we have neon lights, which is also a type of plasma as well. So please don't touch neon lights. You're going to burn yourself.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the technologies, let's talk about if humans would be able to live underwater.
So in order to live underwater, there are 4 things to undercome. Number 1 is breathing underwater, because we need oxygen to live.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this point is easy. Just develop gills. We have so many animals that already live underwater, so we could just copy their idea, just copy their homework. So develop gills. Number 2, it's very cold under the water because deep down the sunlight doesn't really reach, so there's basically like barely any heat down there. So it can get very cold, and your body kind of needs a certain temperature in order to survive. So a solution to this, to kind of deal with the coldness down there, is called the countercurrent heat exchange, which happens to be something that tuners do. So we're going to be copying a lot of fish with gills, and we're going to be copying tuners. So tuna, basically the countercurrent heat exchange basically says that the blood that comes from the core of the body is warm. So you can kind of imagine that there are like these huge tubes that go around your body to kind of carry blood and like feed oxygen to the different parts of the body. So you can put the blood that is pumped out from the core next to the tube that has to go into the core. So as the quote unquote warm blood goes out, it can transfer heat to the blood that is going back into the core because of chemistry and physics. Let's not go too much into detail. So basically, when you have this kind of heat exchange in the blood is not going to freeze, and will kind of, at least we're going to have a quote unquote comfortable temperature. Or even if we feel cold, at least we'll still survive, which I guess is the goal of this point. Huh? So the next thing to overcome is hydration. So when you're under the water, you can still lose water. So in chemistry, there is this one thing called osmosis. You may have heard of it during the exam period, where you quote unquote osmosis knowledge into your body. But how it actually works is basically you can think that in your body there's a lot of water, and because you're under the sea, you're also surrounded by a lot of water as well. So in the water in our body, there is quote unquote stuff in it. You can think of it as some kind of different particles that keep our body working. So in our body, there's stuff, and the concentration of stuff in our body is different from the seawater. So the problem that comes with this is that, so you can kind of think that because there's a difference between the concentration in your body and outside, it wants to kind of equalize. So the water in your body is going to kind of seep out through your skin and kind of leak into the seawater, which is how you kind of lose water underwater. The problem is that your body needs water to survive. So if you're dehydrated even underwater, you're going to die.
Definitely.
Yeah, so a solution for this is basically you can drink seawater. Now, the thing with seawater is that it's very salty. It has a lot of salt, it has a lot of sodium. Your kidney are going to die if it has to filter throughout a lot of... So there are already a lot of animals that live underwater that kind of have this same problem of dehydration. So it kind of developed this kidney that's this very strong kidney that can filter a lot of salt. So even with the high level of salt, in the seawater, even if you drink it, it will be able to filter out and kind of use the water to kind of sustain and survive underwater. So if you have that kind of kidney, just drink seawater. Very safe. Actually, don't.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. You're gonna die. Okay. So the last thing we have to consider in order to live underwater, and also the last thing that we have to overcome is water pressure. So you can imagine that when you're underwater, there's a lot of water above you. So water is quite heavy. So when there's a lot of water above you, it's gonna crush you. So if you have any kind of space or air in your body, it's going to collapse if you're underwater for too long. Now, a solution to this is you can use pressurized air. So divers, they breathe pressurized air to make sure that their lungs don't collapse. Basically, it's kind of like this air that can push against the water that is pushing against your body. Now, it also comes with a new problem because this pressurized air, obviously it contains a lot of gas, so there is going to be more gas dissolved in your blood. And when you have too much gas in your blood, when you go up to the surface, that's going to be a problem because the gas might explode and you're going to die.
Again.
I feel like there's a lot of death in this conversation.
Yes,
so
a lot.
A very simple solution to this, obviously, is don't rise too quick. But let's say we found Atlantis and we want to live under the water because it looks a lot better or whatever. But you have a meeting on land. You're late for the meeting already. You're not going to wait until you can rise to the surface level. You have to be fast or you're going to get fired or something like that. So one of the things that you can do is there's this thing called a swim bladder that we will still need to develop. This bladder can kind of pump out air from the blood and kind of let it out through some other ways. Maybe burping will work. Although maybe not most elegant way to let out gas, but at least you're not gonna die.
Yeah.
So I'll take that any day. So basically, in essence, to summarize, in order to live underwater, you have to do 4 things. Number 1, you have to develop gills, which takes a lot of time, probably millions of years to develop. Number 2, you have to have this counter current heat exchange. That also takes 1,000,000 years, probably more, to develop, and you would basically become a tuna. Number 3, you have to have this huge kidney, or very strong kidney, that can filter salt water, so that when you drink salt water, you're not going to die. It's going to take probably a couple more million years to develop that. And number 4, water pressure. And you kind of have to develop a system where that your lungs are not going to collapse. And like even if you have pressurized air, you're gonna have to have a very good bladder that will make sure that if you rise too fast, your blood will not explode.
Yeah. And we would not like to see a human explode out of nowhere.
Yeah, I would be scared.
That's
Now that we've talked about the theoretical part, let's talk about something that is a bit more quote-unquote realistic. So there's this tribe of nomads called the Bajaus. So they are known as the sea nomads because they are the first known humans to have genetically adapted to diving. Although it's not really like living underwater, but at least they can stay underwater for longer than most people. So these people, they can stay underwater for over 10 minutes at 60 meters deep. I can't even put my head underwater for like 2 minutes without dying. So not that I've tried, but probably not a good idea.
Yeah, but it's already so deep.
Yeah.
Can you just imagine like the pressure and everything?
Yeah. So these the Bajaus, the sea nomads, they live around Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So then, because they're nomads, they don't really have a specific place that they live in, and they are found to have larger spleens. So seals and other marine mammals have very large spleen in order to stay underwater. And these people, these sea nomads, they are found to have roughly about 50% larger spleens than normal people. Anyway, now that we've got the science out of the way, let's go talk about something actually interesting for once.
Okay, so now that Nawat has said everything about it, I'm gonna dive into the movie part.
Yay, finally.
Okay, like Nawat mentioned before about Aquaman and me mentioning about the heart of Atlantis, right? the heart of Atlantis.
Atlantis,
Atlantis,
the lost empire.
yeah, the lost empire. I'm sorry. So we could see that in Aquaman. I mean, everyone. Pretty sure most of the people have watched it. I mean, like it's popular DC comic. Yeah. So in this we can see the amount of advancement in terms of like borders, army, and like the state of living is like so luxurious that I think even we humans who are that luxury can never compare to their style of living. And their, how do I say it, like, but if you have to look with Atlantis the Lost Empire, it shows more of how Atlantis was lost. But even though people didn't stop living there now, except for the lone survivor, it showed the amount of culture that was enculturated in that place. You can see the structures, the statues, everything. It's just like this shows evidence that, I mean, not evidence, but like, come on, Atlantis is like too sophisticated, too advanced, even for us humans to behave that way. I mean, we can do that maybe in another 100 years. I don't know, but like Atlantis was already too advanced for their times. Our times, I mean, for our times. They could even be more advanced than us in the future. Who knows? If they existed, we do not know.
If.
If.
This whole episode is a big if. And speaking of the whole episode, that's it. So before we end the episode, let's ask some questions through the Google form so you can kind of talk and discuss. So the question for this episode is, do you think Atlantis is real? And if you think it's real, where do you think it exists? I know that I talked a little bit about how Plato said that it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but maybe someone who translated Plato's text was wrong, or maybe Plato got it wrong. Who knows?
Yeah, we don't know for sure.
Yeah, so let us know, and someone from our club will see you next week, I think.
Yeah, another 2 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So,
anyways, we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. See you.